And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, along with other ministers, are paying tribute to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the former Prime Minister. It is the 100th birth anniversary of Atal Bihari Vajpayee today. This is the scene at the Sadaiv Atal in Rajghat in Delhi, where several ministers and union ministers, including Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and others are present at the spot, paying floral tribute to Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Well, Atal Bihari Vajpayee is also known as the man of the masses who has been firm in his political convictions. The Good Governance Day is also celebrated to mark the anniversary of Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and today they are paying tribute to Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who is the former Prime Minister of India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Union Home Minister Amit Shah, Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla and others are paying floral tribute to Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee at the Sadaiv Atal at Rajpath in Janpath, Delhi. President Draupadi Murmu arrives at the Sadaiv Atal Sthal, where floral tributes are being paid as the nation remembers Bharat Ratna Vajpayee. Remember, on October 13 in 1999, he took charge as Prime Minister of India for the second consecutive term at the head of a new coalition government, the National Democratic Alliance. He was Prime Minister for a short period in 1996. He is the first Prime Minister since Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru to have become Prime Minister of India with 2 successive mandates. A veteran parliamentarian whose career stretches over 4 decades, Vajpayee has been elected to the Lok Sabha 9 times and to the Rajya Sabha twice, which is a record by itself. As India's Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Chairperson of various important standing committees of Parliament and Leader of the Opposition, he has been an active participant in shaping India's post-independence domestic and foreign policy. He has been known as the vision behind the new India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also penned a letter praising Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In fact, India commemorates Good Governance Day every year on December 25 to honor the birth anniversary of former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. My colleague Vasudha Venugopal is also joining me for more on this. Vasudha, the nation is remembering Bharat Ratna Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and rich tributes are being paid to Atal Bihari Vajpayee at the Sthal, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi arriving. Behind him is Union Home Minister Amit Shah and Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla and others.
That's right, Aditi. And I've been to this Atal Samadhi, and it's called Sadaiv Atal. And there's also the poetry aspect to Atal Bihari Vajpayee that is very that's remembered by the whole country, in fact many in the world. And if you look at Sadaiv Atal, there are poetry of Atalji everywhere, and today the Prime Minister is there. In fact, he has reached quite early in the day. Today, the whole day, BJP will also be having programs to commemorate the legacy and memory of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. In fact, NDA leaders have been called to JP Nadda's house at noon, and they will be talking about coordination, because Atal Bihari Vajpayee also left behind this legacy of taking allies along, at the same time also showing what good governance means. He was the first NDA Prime Minister, first BJP Prime Minister. In that way, it was a big milestone landmark for the Sangh Parivar, for the Jan Sangh. So clearly this is a special day for the history of the BJP, and that's why the Prime Minister is there, and he will of course be taking part in other programs throughout the day, which will be in some ways centered around the legacy of Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Absolutely, Vasudha, and there have been times when the Prime Minister has remembered Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Today, several projects are also lined up for him. Tell us and take us through the key highlights of former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee during his tenure.
If you talk about the legacy of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the fact that, he took India, the allies along of NDA is the most important thing politically. Of course, the fact that some of these allies did not support him towards the end of his career, and he was also seen as someone who's unfairly removed from the post of the Prime Minister, somebody who lost elections, because India Shining was considered as one of those, political campaigns which actually showed that the government had done a lot of good work, be it the Golden Quadrilateral or infrastructure projects, or for that matter, the nuclear tests that we have, the kind of army efficiencies that we have built, armed forces efficiencies that we have built, the kind of course, the equation with Pakistan really, went through a very turbulent phase at that time. But, we also saw the emergence of, our victors in Tiger Hill. So, Atal Bihari Vajpayee has a very complicated history, but, most of it really positive for India, and that is what BJP really, talks about. There have been some unfortunate incidents like this hijacking of IC-814, the Kandahar hijacking, and a couple of other things which, of course, did leave a blot in the history of the country. But that is also something that this BJP under Narendra Modi has learned to correct, and which is why they show their government as completely, responsive. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee's legacy is also important for the BJP, which is why they celebrate his birthday as Good Governance Day. And they want to keep this in the memory of people. In fact, they keep talking about how several important things were brought in, including constitutional status to the OBC Commission and a couple of other things. The fact that he also made Abdul Kalam, he was instrumental in making Muslim the president of the country. Several of those, someone who was very cordial with everybody else, somebody who had a very appealing personality, somebody who was also a poet, which is very unlike regular traditional politicians, and somebody who also had a sense of humor. So I think his legacy and memory go beyond what we think of traditional politicians, which is why he is celebrated across the country, and his birthday is in some ways commemorated so widely by the BJP itself.
Vasudha, while today Prime Minister Narendra Modi was paying tribute to Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he said he also underlined Mr. Vajpayee's leadership when India conducted nuclear tests in Pokhran. Tell us about that experience and how that impacted today's world.
Absolutely, that was considered the most important milestones in India, also projecting itself as a power to, reckon with, a country that is not weak, somebody that should not be taken for granted. And remember, at that time, when they're going through a turbulent phase with, of course, Pakistan, and all of us would have been really young then, and I still remember the visuals that came in from Pokhran. Someone like George Fernandez, who was Chief Defence Minister then, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, very, very unapologetic about the fact that our country needs to be protected, and we will go to any extent to ensure that we have basic defence, on our side. And of course, the West did not like it. Several of our own allies did not like it, and that was seen as a very brave, step by Atal Bihari Vajpayee government. And of course, that is something that the Prime Minister always appreciates, because even now we do follow this path of nation first, and that is something that Dr. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister, and the Prime Minister himself have said, that we make our own decisions and we're not really dependent on our allies, to decide the course of our own foreign policy.
Vasudha, Prime Minister also underlined the role of Atalji when forming an alliance of the NDA. He said, and I quote, that Atalji presided over the creation of the NDA, which redefined coalitions in Indian politics. He brought people together and made NDA a force for development, national progress and regional ambitions. His parliamentary brilliance was seen throughout his political journey. He belonged to a party with a handful of MPs, but his words were enough to rattle the might of all-powerful Congress party at that time.
Absolutely, Aditi. Maybe that is why it is also, quite symbolic of Atal Bihari Vajpayee's legacy and memory as a consent builder, as somebody who could, build consensus, somebody who could take others along, which is why the NDA meeting is also going to be held today at JP Nadda's house in about 2 hours from now. And including TDP, JDU, these are oldest allies of, NDA, and they have been around since the time of Atal Bihari Vajpayee. He, in some ways, not just nourish this relationship, also ensure that the allies grew. And, the importance of allies for the BJP is far more now, considering that it doesn't have the magic number of 272 in the parliament this time. It has 240 MPs. It is dependent on its allies for that absolute majority, 16 MPs from TDP, 12 MPs from JDU and several other parties. Someone like, Chirag Paswan, whose father also had an equation with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. So, all of that is very symbolic of the fact that the NDA meeting is being held on Atal Bihari Vajpayee's birth anniversary. And I think they are going to, the on agenda, of course, is building of consensus, ensuring that everybody remains on the same page, all the allies, and taking forward this alliance, which clearly has the imprint of Vajpayee's work, efforts, and his personality.
Absolutely. And Vasudha, Prime Minister, when speaking about Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he was for a very shortest time, he was the Prime Minister in 1996. And when Prime Minister today wrote about him, he said he preferred to resign in 1996 instead of following the path of horse trading and dirty politics.
Absolutely. There was, he did become the Prime Minister once. Of course, he didn't have the kind of win. Then when he came back, winning the elections, of course, he did serve the whole term. And then, of course, the campaign that took place did not really kind of show what India was going through. And, of course, the UPA came back to power. The Prime Minister, when he lost election, it was some of his own allies who sort of decided not to support him. There were also other issues which, of course, the Prime Minister does talk about. And he says that if it was, this time, if it was, in contemporary times, politicians would have had very different ideals and values. But Vajpayee was also known to be a man of ideals, a man of values. And he, of course, decided to sort of not really go down that path of using unethical moves to remain in power, and which is also something that the Prime Minister credits him for.
While talking about the role of NDA, Vasudha, the Prime Minister elaborated how Mr. Vajpayee agreed to merge his party, then Jan Sangh, with the Janata Party to challenge the Indira Gandhi government after the emergency, which was a very crucial time period of our Indian history. Many political reforms came after that period. Tell us about the role of Mr. Vajpayee during that time.
Well, emergency, like we all know, was the darkest spot of Indian democratic history, because not just opposition leaders were sort of imprisoned and not really allowed to ride, or for that matter even roam around freely. There were many restrictions on common people, and it was always used by the Congress party to show that it is putting forward a system of discipline in the country, when it was exactly the opposite of democratic ideals that the country was formed on. And people like L.K. Advani, for that matter, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, all these, senior BJP leaders, including, Arun Jaitley, some of those new ones. And of course, the Prime Minister himself, had a very important role to play in the emergency. So these were stalwarts of the anti-emergency movement, which was, of course, led by J.P. Narayan. And there were other leaders from socialist parties as well. But of course, Jan Sangh was not a big party then. BJP was not really huge then. To get everybody on the same page, because it was democracy of the country that was more important, and that need to be sort of that need to be put in place again, and that had to be fought for. I think that was important, which is why I think people like Vajpayee and several others forgot, in some ways kept their differences aside and ensured that there was one common platform for all the anti-emergency activists to come together, challenge what was going on in the country, and ensure that change was brought in.
Vasudha, when we talk about Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he was not just an exceptional orator, but also was known for his poems like "Main Haar Nahi Manunga" and others.
Absolutely. The poetry, of Atal Bihari Vajpayee is considered he's one of those politicians who not just was inclined to write poetry, but also someone who had a great sense of humor. He was a great orator. So he had a style of speaking, which I've not seen in any politicians. He would speak in chaste Hindi, and also his poetry was not just motivational, but also talked about commitment, self-determination, and, the importance of grit, not just in politics. It was made for common man. That also in some ways contributed to him being accessible, being appealing to common voters and common men and women long after he's gone. And I think that has been one of his strengths, one of the primary aspects that has also made him as popular as he is today.
Absolutely. And just to name a few of his poetries, I have it with me. Geet Naya Gata Hoon. In this poem, the poet portrays Parliament as a writer. Atal Bihari Vajpayee believed that incumbency has fatigued the government machinery, and through his words, he conveyed his thoughts. He was also optimistic at the same time that a change in government will rejuvenate the parliament and the country will grow and shine. And that is why his poem moves from Geet Nahi Gata Hoon to Geet Naya Gata Hoon. And more like these, he has always written it in a way that also brings out the political activities that are happening around the country when he writes such poems. Well, exceptional orator, even the opposition enjoys Atal Bihari Vajpayee's speeches and those subtle attacks that former Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee has made on the opposition while speaking inside the parliament. There's a very unique, excellence and quality about Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Vasudha. He's not only known for his oratory skills, but the silence also was much talked about.
Absolutely. He took people along. He was out and out a politician. His oratory was, considered one of his best forte. And he could cast a spell on, people who are listening to him. He could delight his audience. And he could use both sarcasm, both, also humor. And, he could use these various aspects to debate with his opponents, but also do all of that in a very cordial way. And he was also seen as, in some ways, not hardcore, in the sense, militant Hindu types, but he was someone who's seen as open to, ideas. He was seen as someone who took people along. And remember that he also came from Madhya Pradesh, and he had both a brilliant career in school and in university. If you look at his career, he has had scholarships throughout. He won them on merit, which is why it showed that, he was a brilliant student right from the beginning. And his father was also a good speaker, which is why, both of them created history in Lucknow University. They studied law together. And of course, he's been with the RSS and he studied in places like Kanpur as well. And, his career started with, taking part in the Quit India movement. And he, of course, gave up his studies. He was imprisoned during that time. So he does have some experience of taking part in freedom struggle. And he, of course, his earliest mentor was Shyama Prasad Mukherjee. And, he was Shyama Prasad Mukherjee's private secretary. And he was with him when Shyama Prasad Mukherjee died in Kashmir. So clearly that also is one of those pivotal moments for the BJP. And you know what has happened with Article 370. It was abrogated with a lot of conviction by the Modi government. And he has been a journalist. So you know how it is. As a journalist, he knew to understand the pulse of people, and he used his oratory, his poetry, and his personality to the max.
Certainly, a rich legacy and nation remembering their Bharat Ratna on this 100th birth anniversary. Thank you so much, Vasudha, for joining us with those details.